What is up, crazy fam? Guys, listen up. In today's video, we're going to take a look at my new melee tank DPS build. This build can pretty much do all of those things combined. The goal of this build is to do some crazy melee damage, but at the same time, feel absolutely invincible and literally just stand in the middle of a fire tornado, dealing high damage and absolutely destroying bosses. And on top of all of that, we're pretty much going to have infinite relics. We're also going to have 2 melee weapon options, depending on what kind of boss you're fighting, both for ranged or close encounters. Okay, now let's go in depth with this build. We're going to start off with the classes. We're going to be combining the medic with the challenger, but medic is going to be our prime archetype because we're going to be taking advantage of the regenerator prime perk. After restoring 250 total health to allies, which obviously includes yourself, regain a spent relic charge. And this right here is absolutely phenomenal because we're going to be combining it with the one and only crystal heart. On use, regenerate 115% of max health over 10 seconds. Movement speed is reduced by 50% and incoming damage is reduced by 25% lasts 10 seconds. And since we're regenerating 115% of our max health over 10 seconds, that works really well with the regenerator prime perk. Since we're going to be standing in front of the boss and tanking those shots, we're going to be getting healed at the same time thanks to the relic and the other things that we're going to go over here in a minute. But as soon as you hit 250 total health regen, you're going to get an extra relic. So pretty much through the whole fight, you're going to feel invincible and you're going to be able to regenerate not just your HP, but your relics, which makes this build really fun. Now for the skill, we're going to be using the healing shield. The medic quickly expels healing energy to shield all allies within 25 meters for 100% of their max health for 10 seconds. While shielded, allies regenerate 30% of their max health over the duration. That means that this skill is also going to be perfect with the regenerator prime perk because it's going to help us get those relics back every time we use the skill. And this skill is also perfect when you mess up the rotation. Let's say you forgot to use the relic to have that crazy regen. You just pop this skill and you're safe. You don't have to worry about anything for 10 seconds and you can just fix the rotation. We also have invigorated, and when we combine this with the one and only juggernaut from the challenger class, this is where the melee damage goes insane. Become nearly unstoppable, gaining 3 stack of bulwark, 15% increased movement speed and melee speed, and 50% increased melee damage. Stagger level reduced by 1, lasts 25 seconds. So this combination of skills right here gives you both survivability thanks to the shield, to the bulwark, everything like that. And on top of that, you get tons of damage from the juggernaut. And obviously we have close quarters. For the armor, we're going to be using the Mark 1 armor full set, and we're also going to be using the potion to increase our armor even further. On the relic, we're going to be using mythic fragments such as 20% melee crit damage, 10% melee crit chance, and 15% melee attack speed. And as for the weapons, as mentioned, we're going to have 2 choices. If you're going to be fighting a boss that is long range, we're going to be using the World's Edge sword at +10. And for the mutator, we're going to be using the overdrive. This is overall one of the best mutators for melee builds. You gain tons of critical chance and critical damage. However, if you're fighting a close range boss, Stonebreaker is a monster. And for the mutator on the Stonebreaker, you're still going to be using the same one, which is going to be the overdrive. And as for the weapons, we're pretty much going to be using them to utilize the mods. And this is where the really fun part of this build begins, because you're going to be throwing the Firestorm mod at the boss. Then you're just going to rush the boss in the middle of this fire tornado and unleash your greatsword damage. And for the mutator, we're going to be using the harmonizer in order to increase the Firestorm damage in combination with Nebula, which comes with the Nanoswarm mod, which also deals pretty good damage in combination with the feedback mutator. Now, before I talk about the jewelry, I want to make one thing very clear. The beauty of Remnant 2 is that there's so many things that you can experiment with. This build that you see on your screen right now will give you the ability to deal tons of melee damage and feel invincible at the same time. And by the way, we're also going to have some crazy movement. We're going to talk about that here in a second. But if you guys want to experiment a bit more, go ahead and do that. Maybe you want to switch out Butcher's Fetish for Matriarch's Insignia. As mentioned, the whole beauty of Remnant 2 is experimenting and having fun with the loadouts. So if you do want to move some pieces around, once again, don't be afraid to do so. Let's start with the amulet. Butcher's Fetish increases critical chance by 15% and critical damage by 25% for 15 seconds after striking an enemy with a charged melee attack, which is pretty much all we're going to be doing with this build. The next ring here is Bright Steel Ring. It gives the wearer the fastest evade roll regardless of their armor encumbrance. This ring gives us the ability to use heavy armor, which increases our survivability, and yet at the same time, we can roll like crazy, which is super fun. However, we're gonna take all of this to the next level by using the bisected ring. Gain infinite stamina. All damage received is increased by 25%. First, let's talk about the stamina part, right? This literally means that we will have charged attacks with our melee all the time, and on top of that, since we're using bright steel ring, we can roll around infinitely, which makes boss fights much easier. You can deal tons of melee damage. Then if you want to get away from some attack, or you need to pop your relic, you can just roll away non-stop, find a safe position, pop the relic, and go back in. So this is a very powerful combination of rings. However, hear me out, it gets better. This ring makes us take 25% increased damage, right? Which is a lot. However, guys, since we're using the crystal heart, this one completely cancels that nerf out. Incoming damage is reduced by 25%. That's why this combination right here, bright steel ring, bisected ring, and the crystal heart, is so perfect. Next up, we're going to be using burden of the gambler for increased crit chance and critical damage, and finally probability cord. However, the relic isn't the only source of our survivability and health regen, so let's talk about that. We're going to take a look at the traits. First of all, we're going to start off with fortify maxed out. The reason I'm running kinship is because of the fire tornado. When you shoot that mod at the boss, in order for you to stand in there and not take pretty much any damage, you're gonna need kinship. Next up on the list, we have regrowth to get some extra health regen. We also have the medic trait, increases healing by 50%. Vigor and expertise, both maxed out. We also have siphoner at level 10, some extra healing every time we deal damage. And finally, fitness at level 9. Now let's quickly go over the rotations. It's actually very simple, guys. What you want to do is start off with Nebula. You're gonna pop the mod, you're gonna get ready to push the boss. Then as you get closer to the boss, you're gonna use the tornado mode. Then you're gonna use your relic, your skill, and rush the boss and do as much damage as possible with your charged melee attacks. So think about it. You're doing fire damage, your nano swarm mod is kicking in, dealing some extra damage on top of that, and you're combining all of that with some insane melee damage. And that's what makes this build so much fun. And just standing there like Conan the Barbarian and dealing tons of damage to bosses, yeah, you can easily see why this build has become one of my favorites in the game. And guys, keep in mind, we have absolutely S tier movement, and even though the relic lowers our movement speed by 50%, we're running a melee build. We're still going to be standing in front of the boss and dishing out damage, right? We don't really need to run around like crazy. However, thanks to the combination of the rings, don't forget, you can roll around infinitely, which is even faster than just running around. So at the end of the day, this build has all of the things combined. It has S tier survivability, damage, and movement all in one. So yeah, this is 100% worth your time. Put this build together and make sure to let me know what you guys think in the comment sections below. If you guys are looking for some other builds, high DPS builds, space samurai builds, some awesome AoE builds, I'm gonna drop the link to all of those videos in the description. Before I go, guys, I want to thank you once again for all the love and support. We're getting closer and closer to 30,000 subscribers. None of this, and I mean none of it, would be possible without the support of every single one of you guys that watch. Drop a like, drop a sub, whatever it is, I appreciate all of it. You guys literally make it possible for me to follow my dreams, to do what I love to do so much, and take care of my family at the same time. And for that, I will forever be grateful. As always, ladies and gents, never forget to share that positive energy all around. Take care, and I'll see you on the next one.
Let's go! Let's go, baby! Let's go!
I mean, we literally have the best community of all time. Oh! Oh, he got no scoped!